A high school basketball game between the Raiders and the Wildcats was tied at the end of the first quarter. So we have two teams and they are tied at the end of the first quarter. The number of points scored by the Raiders in each of the 4 quarters formed an increasing geometric sequence. And the number of points scored by the Wildcats in each of the 4 quarters formed an increasing arithmetic sequence. At the end of the 4th quarter, the Raiders had won by 1 point. Neither team scored more than 100 points. What was the total number of points scored by the two teams in the first half? Okay, a lot of information are given, and the table is probably the best way to approach. So I'm gonna write the scoreboard for our quarterly points increase. So we have Q1. Okay, let me first write Raiders and Wildcats. Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and our total. Okay. And we can okay, now we can set K for both the Raiders and the Wildcats. The reason is after the first quarter it said it was tied, so we'll have the same number, but starting from quarter 2 and 3 and 4 we don't have different numbers. By the way, don't get confused that Q2 here is not the cumulative point of what Q1 and Q2, and it just means that quarterly point. So when Raider has 30 points and then say the Raider in the Q2 has 35 points, now the total will be 65 points. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. And now let's kind of review what the geometric sequence looks like. You know, the geometric sequence is a sequence that takes the ratio in each successive term. So we have one Rn minus 1 is equal to An. So nth term, it has this behavior. So knowing that, we can multiply by r in each successive quarter. So we have kr squared and kr cubed. Now notice that the question said it's increasing geometric sequence, therefore the r has to be greater than 1, meaning the ratio has to be greater than 1. If it's equal to 1, then we don't have increasing. Also, if we have something less than 1, then that's decreasing. So it's good to remember that r is greater than 1 in the geometric sequence. Now moving to our Wildcat, who takes the arithmetic sequence. Arithmetic sequence just takes the common difference in each successive term. So I'm gonna write k plus d, k plus 2d, k plus 3d. That's very common. And let's write our total. So when we add all these, okay, the constant k can be pulled out. So I will have k r plus r squared plus r cubed, and don't forget to add 1 there because of this. And then over here I'm gonna get 4k plus 6d, right? Okay, so we have the total value for both. Now where do we get some clues that kind of connect the relationship between the total points of the Raiders and the Wildcats? Well, if you look at the question, it said the Raiders had won by 1 point. Now we it has to be total points that's increased by 1. So let's translate that statement into a mathematical equation. So k r plus, okay, let's start with a constant. 1 plus r squared plus r cubed equal 4k plus 60. Now we have to add plus 1 because this is the score of Raider score. Okay. This is a wildcat, 4k plus 60. It's just a Raider won by 1 point. Okay, so now if you're familiar with the 1 plus r squared plus r cubed, this is totally like, familiarly with the function. You also notice that can be simplified as r to the 4th minus 1 over r minus 1. If you didn't get that, that's okay. You can still solve this because that's not the main idea, but just to let you know that this can be further be broken into r squared plus 1 minus 1 and r squared plus 1. And notice that r squared minus 1 can be further reduced to r minus 1 and r plus 1. And notice how this cancel out, and when you factor this out, you're gonna simply get r cubed, r squared, r and plus 1. And notice how this is equal to that thing, right? So that's why I could replace this into the parentheses. So let me write it down. K r4 minus 1 over r minus 1 equal 4k plus 60 plus 1. Now the thing is, in the basketball, there is no such thing as fraction point or decimal point for each point. It has to be integer value. Okay, so coming here, now they give us a very nice hint. Neither team scored more than 100 points. So let's write that parameter. In other words, neither team got over 100 points. Now this really narrow our range of possible K's and R and D's. And especially R here. If you look at the Raiders' point, now imagine that R equals 2. Okay, that's fine. You may not go over 100. But we know for sure when you have R equals 5. When R equals 5, we're gonna violate this statement. Neither team scored more than 100 points. That's because 5 to the cube is 125, and we know k has to be positive, so that's already over 100. So let's write down R can not be 5 or greater. Okay, let me restate that. When you have 5 here, you're gonna get over 100 points, and we don't want that. So that gives us R equals 2, 3, and 4. And remember earlier that R cannot be 1 because then we would violate the increasing part of the geometric sequence. It just means a k, 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 k for each quarter, and that's not increasing. So that gives us only 3 possible R. Okay, but our job is to restrict that to find a K and D accordingly. So let me write a table that kind of organizes my point. So R equals 2. Let's actually write on the left side. R equals 2, R equals 3, and R equals 4. Now let's plug it into our equation. When R equals 2 here, you get 16 minus 1, 15. 15 over 2 minus 1, you get 1. So K (15k) equal, now you have 4k plus 60 plus 1 on the right side. Now the k's are the like term, so I can simplify it as 11k equals 60 plus 1. Now let's plug R equals 3. When r equals 3, you get 81. 81 minus 1, you get 80. And 3 minus 1 in the bottom becomes 2, so you get 40k. So 40k equal. Now when you plug r equals, we already did, and all you have to do is just set the 4k plus 60 plus 1. Now that becomes 36k equals 60 plus 1. What about r equals 4? When r equals 4, you get 256 on the 255 if you subtract 1. 255 over 3. Okay, let's see what that number becomes. Oh, okay. I did that earlier. So 255 over 3, you get 85k. And then we write 4k plus 60 plus 1. So the like terms cancel out. 81k equals 60 plus 1. Now you have to ask yourself, when r equals 2, we get 11k. Okay. Now the reason why I also wrote this is it shows the radar's point. Okay, I mean it can be on the right side, 4k plus 60 plus 1, but we know from the left side we can find what the r can be, or what r can be restricted to. Well, remember that this shows the radar's point and it cannot go over 100 points. Now what's the maximum k you can get? In other words, this has to be less than 100. I mean they are same thing, but let's focus on the k only because we have to find k. 6 is the maximum you can have because when you multiply 6 times 15 you get 90. Okay, so this tells us that k can be, what about here? K can only become 1 and 2 because once you get 3, radar's points become 120, right? That's not what we want. And same thing for our r equals 4. Here only 1 can satisfy. So I know it has 9 possibility, but this isn't as bad. We just have to eliminate one by one, and there should be only one that gives us the energy values for each variable, meaning k, d, and r. We already determined that r is an integer here, and then we have to determine which one gives us the integer for k and d. So let's plug it in. When k equals 1, okay, you get 11, right? 11 minus 1, you get 10. No, this doesn't work. 10 equals 60. D is not gonna be an integer, so we're gonna cross that out. What about k equals 2? When k equals 2 here, you get 22. 22 minus 1, you get 21 equals 60. Still not, D is not gonna be an integer, so not good. 3. When k equals 3, you get 33, and then you subtract 1, you get 32 equals 60. Well, that's not gonna be integer again. And say 4, 44, 60 plus 1, you get 43, nope. And then 5, 55, 60, so 54. Oh, wait a minute, D becomes 9, right? 6 times 9, you get 54. So we don't have to go further. In fact, when you try this, you'll find that none of the other values want to give you the integer. Or if they do, the problem fails, right? So that's usually not that doesn't usually happen in this big competition. So we determined the k has to be 5. Okay, that case is when r equals 2. So we didn't even have to worry about r equals 3 and r equals 4. So let's write down when r equals 2, we can have k equals 5 and then d equals 9. That's all integers. That's what we wanted so far. That's why we had to do all this calculation. Now that's not the answer, of course. Now let's go back to our question, because all I performed was to fill out our chart here in the scoreboard. Now that we identify for each variable, let's read the question. The total number of points scored by the two teams in the first half. I can box it. Oh. Okay, I can box it now. That sometimes happens. We have to add all these, meaning we're gonna get the cumulative points for the Raiders in the first half, and then the Wildcat, and then we just have to simply add them up. So it's a sum of that. That's our goal. So looking at that, I see 2k plus kr plus k plus d. So actually 3k plus d. Actually, let's write down here. So 3k plus d plus kr. Okay, 3k plus d plus kr. That's our final answer. At least the equation. I'll remember 3k d kr. Okay, app h is the first app. Did I do this right? 3k plus d plus r. kr, yeah. Okay, 3 times 5, and then d is 9. Okay, let me write that kr. K is 5 and r is 2. 15 plus 9 plus 10, you get 24 plus 10, 34. That's our final answer. So going back to our choices, we know it's E.